honored to have with us a legend in the software development world, Uncle Bob, Robert C. Martin. He has decades of experience in the industry, and Uncle Bob has not only shaped our modern software development, but has also been our advocate for professionalism and clean code. And he is the co-author of Agile Manifesto, creator of Solid Principles, and he has greater contributions and have guided countless developers like me in building maintainable, high quality software. And I'm so lucky and I'm so fortunate to talk to Uncle Bob. And he's just not a thought leader, he's educator, mentor, and author, and such a great blessing for us to be able to talk to him again. So, welcome, Uncle Bob. Thank you
Thank,
so
thank
much
you.
for giving me your time. I still can't
Always
believe
a
my
pleasure.
eyes, but I'll try though.
Always a pleasure, Maria.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, Uncle Bob, I have few questions. Uh, I have from my connections as well and for me as well. So, my first and foremost question to you is: how do you balance writing clean code with pressure of meeting tight deadlines? Like you already always have a pressure of meeting tight deadlines, and it is a thing that usually comes to the last. You take so much time in completing those PBIs or those tasks. You feel so pressured by the client. No one understands you at that point. So how do you balance, and how you guide us to balance this pressure with the clean code?
It's been a long journey for me. Many years of fighting that battle, of rushing towards deadlines and feeling like I had to do a bad job in order to satisfy my customer, which makes no sense. How can you satisfy your customer by doing a bad job? I learned the hard way that if you do a good job, you will get done faster than if you do a bad job every time. So the feeling that you need to rush is a feeling that you
Exactly.
also need to set aside and calm down and just do the very best job you can. And by doing that, you will finish in the shortest amount of time.
Thank you very much for your answer. Thank you. And my second question would be: what are some common misconceptions we developers have when what you observed that when someone tries to implement clean code, what are some misconceptions that we shouldn't believe on, we should not trust when we try implementing clean code, especially?
Well, that's an interesting question. There's a fair bit of debate on the internet right now about how big functions ought to be and whether or not we should be doing object-oriented programming or not. There's always this constant discussion and debate on these topics. My advice is don't worry too much about that. When you're following clean code principles, follow them pragmatically, follow them practically. Do not over focus. Anything you do, as long as you do it well, can be improved later. Right? And every time you visit it, you should be able to improve it later. So, one of my rules is that I will always check the code in cleaner than I checked it out. Just a little bit. I will never make it worse. I will always try to make it a little bit better before I check the code in. And my trust is that that will allow the code to constantly be improving. So my advice is don't worry too much about following every principle perfectly. Just do the best you can, do it carefully, do it with a good conscience. And then every time you look at the code, see if there's not something you can do to make it just a little bit better.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well,
Uncle Bob, how did you handle situations where your existing code base didn't actually follow solid principles? How did you started that?
well, that that would be the vast majority of my career. Right? So I learned all of these principles the hard way. And how do you deal with it? Well, I mean, you have to struggle through. I'm sure you've had that experience yourself where you're working in a code base and the code base is not helping you to understand it. It's not helping you to change it. It's not helping you to make progress in it. And over the years, I've learned a few principles on how to improve that. Back in the old days when I was dealing with very, very messy code bases, we just all struggled and we missed deadlines and we shipped bugs and we had terrible catastrophes because we could not keep control over the code. The structure of the code would degrade and degrade to the point where we could not maintain it properly. And it was always a nightmare. Always, we were always putting out fires.
Yes, it's a nightmare. When you doubt your abilities, you face constant stress from product owner, team members, but you can't tell them that please refactor this, make it little bit understandable for others not to suffer too much.
It's difficult to tell people to change the way they work. And the best approach that I've found is to work as well as you can and let yourself be a role model for everyone else. And some people will see that and acknowledge it and will improve. And other people won't. And you will have to live through that.
This is kind of out of scope, but how did you handle that stress? I'm sure you have seen such frustration and stress along your career. How did you handle that stress?
Well, as a young man, not very well. I had, it was very difficult for me. I wound up working very long hours, and that put in a lot of stress on my family and on my marriage. And over time, I learned that that just wasn't worth it. And what I
Exactly.
had to do was find a more efficient way to to satisfy my customers and to produce working code. And what I found was that a attention to detail, following principles, keeping everything clean, was that efficient way. Now, that should not have been a surprise. I mean, every grandparent has told their grandchildren this from the beginning of time, right? Anything worth doing is worth
Exactly.
doing well, but
Exactly.
young people don't necessarily believe that until they're a few decades old.
Exactly. Uncle Bob, this is very important question from my side that how we should determine the right balance between over engineering and under engineering when we are working on a solution. What should be the right balance between over engineering or any guideline? Because there is a thin line between over engineering and under engineering. Sometimes you make very simple situation very complex.
My the rule that I follow there is to under engineer, preferably to over engineer. So if I have a decision to make, I will make it on the side of less engineering, not more. This is tricky because
Exactly.
we software developers think we can see the future. And we see a disaster in the future coming unless we put the facilities into the code right now to handle that future disaster. And often the future disaster does not come. So it is better, I think, to risk a little under engineering as opposed to try to protect yourself with too much. So, day to day, what I will do is I will look at the code, look at what I think is coming in the future, and then make a judgment. And that judgment will usually be on the side of not protecting myself too much from the future. But you can't do that 100%. Sometimes you look into the future and you think, that really is coming. That thing I see out there really is coming, and I have to do something about it now. Those instances should be rare, but when your gut is yelling at you and saying, you've got to do something about that now, it's probably time to listen. So this is there's a little bit of instinct, there's a little bit of experience, a little bit of maturity that goes into this. But all else being equal, under engineer, don't over engineer.
Exactly why you smile a lot, you laugh a lot. I really like it.
Well, I mean, the answers are they're more they're the answers are what I believe, but I'm not convinced that they're actually very helpful. Yeah. You
No, they are very helpful. They are very helpful. From learning your experience is really helpful, and that's why Uncle Bob talking to you live is something unbelievable. That's why talking directly to you. Otherwise, there are your books. We learn from them. We apply them. And literally, your book shaped my future, Uncle Bob. At literally, I never thought before the things that I learned from your books. And
well,
I find very nice. I'm feeling good when I code now.
good, good. You should feel good when you code. Everyone
Yes,
should feel
I
good
feel
when they
I feel confident, and I feel that sometime will come and don't curse me for my code. At least, and all thanks to you. And this is one of the most important question, Uncle Bob. I really always wanted to try TDD because I hear it about LinkedIn, about blogs, but none of my project is using TDD. None
code.
of team is using TDD, and that's what I also suggested to uh, team internal meetings that I want to try TDD, but none of the team members is. I don't know whether they are interested or not. But what advice do you have for teams, smaller or bigger, that they might want to struggle to implement TDD because never ever they have never implemented it before? And what are your suggestions regarding this?
It's important to have a team that has a shared sense of values. In a team where the values are not well shared, the team will suffer friction and eventually will destabilize and fall apart. So if you are going to begin to do test-driven development, it's important that the entire team agrees and that they value what's going to come from test-driven development. You could try it as an experiment. You could say, let's do this for a month and see if it helps. And perhaps enough people will agree. And if that's true, if you get enough people to agree, well, then they can experience the value and maybe even change their minds. Another thing you can do is demonstrate. You can walk through it with people. You can have a lunchtime session where you demonstrate the simple practice of test-driven development. You can demonstrate the advantages. You might win a few people over that way, but there will always be people you don't win over. And when that occurs, you have to face the idea that one day you're not going to be working with those people. one way or another, that team is not going to stay together. It's it is a difficult struggle. It's a struggle that goes on all the time. Test-driven development has been growing. More and more people are doing it, which is good. At some point, I believe there will be um, political pressure to adopt a discipline like this. so that the politicians of the world can feel comfortable that the software their civilization depends upon can be properly constructed. I think that will happen, although that's probably a decade or two in the future. In the meantime, it falls to the rest of us to improve our craft, to improve our disciplines, to try new things and see if they work. I've found test-driven development to
Exactly.
be invaluable. I do it as much as I possibly can. It's not something you can do all the time, but you can do it a lot of the time, and it has vastly helped me in my efforts to be a better programmer.
Now it's I was always thinking about it, but unfortunately, Uncle Bob, you have pressure of completing your PBIs. You always think of implementing it, and it just remains a thought. But to be honest, when I had first introduction with engineering manager, he asked me what improvements can you make to our architecture. I told him or practices. What improvement do you suggest? I only told him that I want to try TDD just once and see its benefits. Something new that I want to try to get a better code confidence for the customers. And he asked me, Uncle Bob, that it required an infrastructure change. At which I want to ask you, does it require the infrastructure change to be able to apply TDD?
Oh no, not at all.
Yeah,
You
not at all.
you as an individual can practice test-driven development in the code that you write. There's no extra infrastructure that you need. Um, you can simply write a test and make it pass, and then write another test and make it pass. And you have a very simple choice in any kind of system. You can either debug a lot or you can write tests.
Exactly. Exactly. At that point, I also was not believing we don't require that infrastructure change. All I can start, Uncle Bob, that you told that made you a better programmer. That made you as well. So that's a road to success. That Uncle Bob followed this path. He became a better programmer. So I should try as well. So this is the one thing that I want to try on me first, and after a few months, I can try involving my team as well. I think
It's
that would be great.
a very good plan.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Uh, Let me quickly go through questions that other people were asking.
Sure.
So this is some Junaid Aziz SQA engineer. He is asking that what are some effective methods to learn clean code for beginners in coding, and specifically if someone is diving into automation things.
Can you repeat that question? I didn't get it.
Yet, what are the effective methods to learn clean code for beginners in coding?
The effective measures for clean code for
Effective
beginners.
methods to learn clean code.
For beginners. The most effective method to learn clean code for beginners is to have a mentor that reads every line of code that the beginners write and comments on it and shows them how to improve it. The worst thing you can do with a beginning programmer is allow that beginning programmer to write 10,000 lines of code without anybody looking at it.
Exactly.
So clearly the first priority for a new coming programmer is to have someone who looks over their shoulder, takes them under their wing, and shows them how to do things better. And I would say that that period of time would last at least 6 months and probably a year.
Exactly. Exactly. If you want to be good at something, at least try it for a certain amount of time. Don't rush. Better be a better be under a wings of a great mentor first. Okay, there is one more question, that how do we measure that we are not under we are ensuring that we are following true agile principles? Because how teams can avoid agile tread Agile theater and ensure that they are truly following Agile principle. Because some people claim that they are Agile, but in real they are not Agile. They only claim that they are Agile.
Oh, agile, agile, agile. The the idea behind agile development is very, very simple, and you will know if you are doing agile development if you are moving in very short cycles, usually 1 week long. You are estimating at the start of those cycles, and you measure at the end of each of those cycles. And the measurements that you make at the end of each cycle tell you how much progress you have made and tell you whether or not you are going to meet the current deadlines. And usually it's not. Agile is a way to know that you are not going to make it early, so that managers can do this thing called management, and they can make provisions for what to do when we miss the deadline. Agile is a way to know how fast you are going, not a way to go fast. That's a big mistake
Exactly.
everybody makes, right? Everybody thinks, oh, we're doing agile so that we can go fast. No, you're doing agile so that you know how slow you're going. And then maybe you can do something about it.
Exactly. That's a true definition nobody told me before. Do you think, Uncle Bob, that Agile practices are simple for some culture? Are they related to some culture?
I don't know if it's culturally related. Agile principles are so simple. Um, I think cavemen 50,000 years ago worked them out. I mean, how do you kill a mastodon, a giant elephant, to get its meat? Well, you have to try a few things and fail a bunch, and then eventually you figure it out. And that's essentially what Agile is. We're going to try a few things, and well, some of them will work and some of them won't, and we'll eventually figure it out. So I believe there's no cultural bias in that sense. What there is, however, is an experience bias. There are people who have had a lot of experience producing systems by heavy upfront planning and then
Exactly.
heavy execution. And they believe in that. They believe in it
Exactly.
strongly. And so when you present to them a very tight iterative approach, it makes no sense. And what they will try to do is they will try to warp and twist the agile way so that it looks like a heavy upfront planning and then heavy execution at the end. They will twist it until it looks like what they're familiar with. So we see that a great deal. We see that a lot with so-called agile approaches. An agile team should be small. 6 people, maybe 7. Not much more than that. We don't want 20-person agile teams. If you've got a group of programmers, if you've got 20 or 30 programmers, you probably need 5 separate teams. That's what agile is. Agile is a way to do small teams doing small things, not big teams doing big things.
If we have team of 26 to 30 people and we claim that we are agile, are we true? Then we are falling against the agile principles.
If
We are
it's
doing
one
against.
team, if it's one team,
It's just one team of 26 to 30 people. I'm just asking.
yeah, that's not agile. One team would be 5, 6, 7 people, something like that. If you have 20 people, you need 3 or 4 teams, maybe 5 teams. And then you need a way
Yes.
to coordinate those teams. The coordination is something we've known how to do for a century or more. I think probably several thousand years. We have learned over the millennia how to organize small teams. That's what the militaries are. That's what big construction firms are. They take things and put them into small teams and they coordinate them. What we did not know how to do was get the small teams to be effective. And that's what Agile is about. The small team in a larger context.
So we can say that if there are 5 backend developers, 3 frontend developers, so we can say maybe one team for the hardware. So we can segregate that. Uh, like we have a team of front-end developers, we have a team of back-end developers, we have this hardware. Then we are agile, or we should, because the project is very big in the context,
Yeah,
and there require many people to
I would
complete
split
it.
that up differently. I would say, okay, you've got 5 back end and 3 front end. I would make 3 teams, one with a front end and a couple of back end, and another with a front end and a couple of back end, and another with a front end and a couple of back end, because I don't want the teams to be split by front end versus back end. I want the team members to work together. I want them all to understand the issues that they're all facing. A back-end developer will be a much better back-end developer if they understand the front-end issues. The front-end developers will be much better front-end developers if they understand the back-end issues. And all of those developers should work on the other side at least a little bit. So the front-end developers should be working with the back-end developers on back-end code, and the back-end developers should be working with the front-end developers on front-end code, so that knowledge and experience moves through the team in a very helpful way. We didn't do this in the decades long past, right? We just all programmed everything. No, there weren't any front end and back end and middleware developers. We didn't divide things that way. We just, if there was something to be done, we just kind of got the code and we did it, and we worked together a lot. And that was very effective. The divisions that we have made nowadays, I think, are harmful.
There is one more question that is coming from my own thoughts. What made you Uncle Bob? Like, was it some background? Were you surrounded by those when you were, in your school? Or what made you basically? Was it that education, your background, your culture, your people? What made you Uncle Bob? What made you do so much for the community? You modernize modern software development. How?
Um, well, at a personal level, I was raised by a very strong father and mother, a very healthy family environment. I married very early. I was 20. My wife was 18. I have found that to be very helpful. The two of us grew up together and we established more of a strong family. I have 4 children. I have 10 grandchildren. It is a wonderful life. Um, that's just on the personal side. On the professional side, I was very lucky to know what I wanted to do extremely early. I fell in love with computers in 1964 when I was 12 years old. My mother had purchased for me a small science kit that had a little plastic computer in it, and I just went over the moon on that. And I've never looked back. I've always had a passion for software. The software industry has changed enormously since those days. I mean, the machines I was working on in the early days could execute 10,000 instructions per second. Now our machines execute 10 billion instructions per second. I remember working on machines that had 4,000 words of memory. Now we have 4 terabytes.
And nobody cares about poor coding.
The situation has changed enormously, but the rules have not. The rules of software have remained constant this entire time. right? The stresses and the situations that we face are the same today that we faced 50 years ago when I started. In the end, we are all just writing while loops and if statements and the occasional assignment statement. And that's what we do. It's all the same. It's just that we do a lot more of it now. So, what made me, my family life, my marriage, my personal outlook, and a passion, just a sheer love for this stuff that we do, this coding, this programming, this intellectual challenge, and it turns into a creation of beauty, a kind of art that very few people can appreciate. But those who can appreciate it deeply.
Exactly, exactly. I agree with you. Already have told you that what I learned from your books, I have implemented it, and I feel comfortable within me, Abiruk,
Well, that's good to hear.
that I have done something right. Maybe some years later, but I have learned something. I have polished myself, and still there are so many people who don't believe it, but that's their way. And we are very lucky to discuss our questions with you, and I'm truly grateful for you to give us some time, Uncle Bob.
It's my pleasure. And say hello to that little child I see.
She wants to say